For more on this week's United Nations General Assembly, we are now joined in studio by political analyst Advocate Sipho Mantula. Advocate, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe this evening. Now, as you heard, Minister Sisulu believes South Africa had an outstanding visit to the UN in New York this week. What's your assessment of how President Ramaphosa and his team fared?
Evening, Lulu, and to the viewers. Lulu, I think what was key was the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit that has to look even at the decade to say come 2019 to 2028, they will be looking at the peace efforts. Remember, this is the global arena where President Ramaphosa had to outline even the African Agenda 2063, but even coming back to domestic issues that affect South Africa, the question of the land reform, the question around economy, but as well as the key element that is around supporting peace initiatives, because South Africa, it will be assuming its role at the UN Security Council as the non-permanent member. And that's where you could hear the continental voice was around the role of Africa in the United Nations Security Council, which it is still been a long debate. Others, they are saying it is the mantra, it has been raised that we need to have a voice in the United Nations. But our team, what is critical is how do you communicate this information to ordinary people?
In terms of that communication, President Ramaphosa's main objective was to sell South Africa as an investment destination. How do you think he fared with his team? And just considering that after the unveiling of the Nelson Mandela statue and his address at the UN General Assembly and his interaction with business leadership,
I think that was very positive in the sense that South Africa, it is trying to come back into the global arena in terms of issues of alleviating poverty, SDGs. But you look at the element of saying that there were challenges in the region, the issues of Ebola, the issues of crime, the issues of corruption. So one can say that for South Africa to be pushing for international business is what even Zimbabwe did, that the same President Mnangagwa raised the issue that Zimbabwe is open for business. And I think that's how even South Africa wants to position that we are a country that will tackle corruption, will deal with the youth unemployment, because I think one element that most of the African leaders, when they go to this global arena, is not to emphasize on the agency, the human agency of the youth, that they want jobs, they want better education, they want security as well, social security. And I think that's where our team, when it looks at economic relations, it should emphasize that we deal with African bloc, because for us to even engage America, it was a bit not fair for us to be dealing with Trump, because I think Trump, we should deal with America post the Trump presidency. That's how we can deal with our global affairs.
But now, in terms of post-Trump era, that may or may not happen, depending on how the vote goes and how Americans decide. Now, in terms of that, we have to deal with President Trump and the team that he has. And in dealing with President Trump, do you think that the African leaders who address the General Assembly, for instance, President Mnangagwa, President Ramaphosa, do you think there was a unifying call in terms of dealing with regional issues or continental issues? You mentioned AIDS, you mentioned Ebola. You mentioned security. Ebola affecting countries like the DRC in a region where they're not able, aid agencies are not able to access that region because of the infighting that is taking place there. The rebels are fighting. The issue of South Sudan, the peace agreement that was signed not so long ago, you and I had a discussion about that, seemingly on tethering feet, where we're not sure whether it is going to stand or not. So all those issues coming into play. Did the African leaders speak in a unifying voice?
One can say that. I think I can pick up the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. I think that was one of the outstanding presentation from him, raising the African voice. Our neighbor that they have recently had elections, the King Mswati, raised the issue of their representation in the UN Council. George Weah from West Africa, he raised the issue that look at our country coming out of transition. We have pushed as a case study for peaceful, for peacekeeping mission, a success story. And I think from the African continent, what we're missing is from Zimbabwe that we know in that global arena, the former president will always take on the superpowers. I think what we did lack from this time, we did lack the radicalism from African leaders to shake this global arena and say that it is high time that Africa must take its lead. And I think that's where President Nana Akufo raised the issue that we can deal with our own challenges because conflicts and crises that the UN is preoccupied with are from the African continent. So why don't you allow us to lead that agenda and debate? He raised the issue of aid, that you are giving us aid with conditions. And I think the last part talking about DRC. DRC actually today declined to sit in the meeting where they will say they were never consulted on the agenda. And it was around the issues of elections that are coming, the issue of Ebola, and the issue of the mining sector in that country. So one can say that the African voice was there, and I think South Africa was an outstanding voice in terms of the Nelson Mandela Peace Summit, and as well as the decade, because Uhuru Kenyatta actually embraced the character of the former President Nelson Mandela in terms of peacekeeping and the peace mediation.
Now, let's look at the United Nations as a multilateral body, with U.S. President rejecting globalism. Do you think that the UN strength has been weakened?
You know, I don't think so, because remember, we're talking of a UN at 70 now in terms of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Internationalism or international politics in the African continent have to relate to ordinary people. And I think American foreign policies in Africa has been a negative force. So when you go to the global arena, we are all equal. Hence we raise the issue of the veto power, that you can't have countries since the inception of the UN still wielding power. So for me is that American foreign policy, it is still weak. Africa has got the intellect and wisdom to deal with its own challenges. And as well, if you look at the global capita, Africa, it is still been melted and been looted by the European countries. So I don't think that America, for them not to be in the global arena or in the multilateral, can't have a negative effect for the African continent, because we have France, that is very brave. You have China, you have Russia. And these are the countries that Africa has now partnered with them as the BRICS. So I don't think America, it is now relevant. What is left with Trump is for him to be still pushing the racism card, to be still pushing this America First, when actually America First belongs to the indigenous American Africans who were there before them.
Sipho, lastly, very quickly, just in wrapping up, on a completely different tune, the recent Dagga ruling here at home in South Africa, do you get the sense that it could have wider implications for the African continent?
Lulu, we don't have to go for our bordering countries, Swaziland, Lesotho. It can boom economically in the SADC region. And I think for constitutional jurisprudence, that's what lacked in that court. Hence, when you look at the court, it looked at international comparative of American courts. So we didn't even look at African courts. Swaziland, Malawi, Zimbabwe is now going for industrialization of the holy hemp under what we call the hemp product. And I think South Africa must move away from being a smoking so-called drug and look at as a renewable resource hemp, and as well as to look at the colonial laws that has criminalized it, and as well as to look at the medicinal use of it. So one can say it will be putting us back to what happened 10 years ago when Barack Obama faced global recession. And what he did, he went on the marijuana industrial hemp. And I think that's where many African leaders are lacking that view to understand that the ruling of the holy hemp has got economical benefits, it's got cultural affirmation of us as African using our own herbs without being controlled by the West.
Advocate, Thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. And that was political analyst, Advocate Sipho Mantula, joining us live in studio. Time now for a quick break. More news when we return. Stay with us.